Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and it's a pleasure to see you, Mr. Mnuchin, and appreciated our visit, and congratulations on your nomination. I've got a series of topics, so I'm going to try to move quickly as well. The United States obviously enjoys enormous advantages, particularly around the status of us being the reserve currency. That allows us lower interest rates and everything from student loans to mortgages. Senator Bennett already raised this, but I want to re-raise it again. The President-elect's comments about potentially renegotiating the debt during the campaign were unprecedented. I want you to again affirm to this body that on a going forward basis it will be your policy, as much as you can influence the President-elect, that we would never again question America's willingness to stand by its debt obligations.
Senator, I agree with that 100%. And also, let me just thank you for meeting with me and also acknowledge, as an incredibly successful business person, I appreciate your service here.
I want that to eat into my time.
Sorry.
It's not that. I have been very troubled by even some folks in elective office who have somehow said we can ignore the debt ceiling without consequences. There are even some that are going out and saying somehow we could prioritize those debt obligations and potentially pay off bondholders, many of them foreign, many of them Chinese, and ignore our obligations to pay states, which would then affect their bond ratings, to pay Social Security trust funds, to honor the commitments the United States government has made to pay salaries of FBI employees, et cetera. It is your policy that the United States, in terms of its debt obligations, needs to honor all its debt obligations and should not have any ability to prioritize those obligations.
Absolutely, and I hope you all work with me so that we get that done. We've already spent the money. We have the obligations. There should be no uncertainty that we are paying the bills.
I think that is extraordinarily important, and those who somehow argue for prioritization would wreak havoc in the financial markets. I want to re-raise again what Senator Bennett raised. Clearly, if you get this role, words that you say and the President-elect will say will have consequences. We've already seen this. The actions of the President-elect in terms of commenting on the strength of the dollar, unprecedented. No president, Democrat or Republican, has ever done this before. It has effects. Now, you will simply be a senior advisor in the cabinet of the President, but how do we ensure, since words have such consequences, that there will be an ability for the Trump administration on economic policy to try to speak with a single voice?
Well, if I am confirmed, I think that once we all get in office and have regular access, both myself and the administration, I think you will see that. And again, there may be times where there's a view that the dollar is slightly too strong, but I do believe we will speak with a unified voice.
But you then expect that the President-elect, but then President, would continue to break all precedent and be willing to weigh into these matters, unlike any prior president?
Well, look, as you know, this president is willing to do a lot of things that other presidents haven't done, and I think many of them are great.
Let's move to another area. One area that I've had a huge amount of concern and interest in, and I know Senator Crapo and a number of us on this panel, is on Fannie and Freddie. And I know there were some people that potentially interpreted some of your comments about recap and release, which would in a sense say, even though the American taxpayer was paid back the $188 billion that we invested in those failing institutions at a moment of crisis, I think both of us would perhaps, from our business standpoint, say that was high-risk capital and we ought to get a better return. But somehow those who simply say, let's refloat these two entities and basically ignore some of the underlying challenges. Do you support that position of recap and release that some have advocated?
So, I mean, let me first be clear. I did make some comments about this. My comments were never that there should be recap and release. What my comments were, and first of all, I've been around the mortgage industry for 30 years. I've seen this for a long period of time. So this is an area that I do believe I have expertise in. For very long periods of time, I think that Fannie and Freddie have been well run without creating risk to the government, as well as they've played an important role. I know you're running out of time, but just bear with me.
Mr. Chairman, can I get an extra 30 seconds, sir?
Go ahead.
Can I just answer this so you get more time? I believe that these are very important entities to provide the necessary liquidity for housing finance. And what I've committed to is that I will work with both the Democrats and Republicans. What I've said, and I believe, we need housing reform. So we shouldn't just leave Fannie and Freddie as is for the next 4 or 8 years under government control without a fix. That I believe we can find a bipartisan fix for these. So on the one hand, we don't end up with a giant bailout. On the other hand, we don't run the risk of completely limiting housing finance.
I appreciate those comments. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Since I took most of the 30 seconds on your statement, I got 2 quick questions. Hopefully you can answer them with yes or no answers. One is, in light of those comments about recap and release, you commit not to support any kind of administrative effort that would bypass the Congress in terms of efforts to recap and release.
So again, I don't want to make any commitments to legislative or not. What I will commit, because it's my responsibility in Treasury, as it relates to certain issues with Fannie and Freddie, what I will commit to, it is my objective to find a bipartisan solution to it, and I would welcome the opportunity to sit down with people on that.
Hope would be the bipartisan consensus that the Banking Committee in particular arrived at was that solution, and we can argue or discuss about how we get there, should end up with a housing finance system that preserves things like the 30-year mortgage, but also makes sure that there is not the current status, which has, when things are going well, private sector gain, but when stuff hits the fan, taxpayer holding the bag. So we'd agree that
I can 100% assure you that I have no interest in that, and I think I understand this well enough that you will find that I won't support any policy that has that case.
Thank you, Mr. Mnuchin.
Senator